I was sitting quietly in a doctor's waiting room when my phone suddenly started ringing. The place was silent except for the low hum of fluorescent lights and occasional cough from another patient. When I looked at the screen, I saw my daughter's name, Angela. I answered immediately, expecting her usual cheerful voice. Instead, what I heard felt strangely cold. "Mom," she said quickly, "Edward and I are flying to Europe tomorrow. I already sold the beach house and your car. We needed the money. Bye." And before I could say a single word, the line went dead. For several seconds, I simply stared at the phone in my hand. 45 years. That's how long I had spent raising her, loving her, sacrificing everything for her. And she ended it all with a 15-second phone call. But something strange happened inside me. Instead of crying, I slowly took a breath and smiled. Because there was one thing my daughter didn't know. My name is Antonia Brooks. I'm 71 years old, and until that moment, I believed I truly knew my daughter. My husband Robert had died 6 months earlier, a sudden heart attack while we were eating breakfast together, just like we had done every morning for decades. That morning felt completely ordinary. Robert had prepared coffee for both of us. He placed cream in mine the way I liked it. He toasted the bread and set it on my plate. Then he leaned over, kissed my forehead, and said softly, "Good morning, my love." Those were the last words he ever spoke. After his death, Angela suddenly became much more present in my life, or at least that's what I believed at the time. She visited several times a week. She helped organize the funeral, she accompanied me to the grocery store, she insisted I schedule a medical checkup. "Mom, you need to take care of yourself now," she would say kindly. Back then, I thought that smile came from love. Now I realized it came from something else. The beach house she had sold meant far more than money to Robert and me. We bought it when Angela was 15 years old, after many years of saving and working overtime. Every summer we went there together. Birthdays were celebrated there, Christmas dinners too. Angela brought her friends, later her boyfriends, and eventually her husband Edward. I cooked for everyone, cleaned the rooms, washed piles of towels. It had always been our family tradition. Apparently, to Angela, it was nothing more than property. And the car she sold was Robert's old Ford pickup truck. That truck was his pride. Every Sunday he washed it carefully, polished the windows, and checked the engine himself. He always parked it under the same tree in front of the house. Angela knew how much that truck meant to me. It was one of the last things that still reminded me of Robert. His scent was still faintly on the seats. After Angela ended the call, I remained sitting in that uncomfortable plastic chair in the waiting room, surrounded by strangers. For the first time since Robert died, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt something unexpected, calm. And then, suddenly, I remembered something. 3 days before Robert passed away, he handed me a large envelope. "Antonia," he had said gently, "put this in your dresser drawer. If anything ever happens to me, open it later, only when you feel ready." At the time, I simply placed it in the drawer without thinking much about it. After the funeral, there had been too many things to deal with. Visitors, paperwork, grief. I completely forgot about the envelope. But now I remembered. The nurse called my name and I went inside the doctor's office. He ran several tests and finally smiled. "For someone of your age, you're in very good health. Just get some rest and eat properly." I thanked him politely, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I was thinking about the envelope waiting in my bedroom, and about Angela's cold voice. And Edward. Edward had never liked me much. I could always see it in the way he looked at me. To him, I was simply an inconvenience. After leaving the clinic, I slowly walked to the bus stop. According to my daughter, I no longer owned a car. While waiting for the bus, I felt another quiet smile appear on my face. There was something almost poetic about the situation. Angela believed she had left me with nothing, but Robert had always been a man who prepared for the future. The bus arrived and I took a seat near the window. Outside, the city moved past slowly. Buildings, shops, people rushing through their daily lives. Everyone had their own worries, their own secrets, and now I had mine. When I arrived home, I walked directly to my bedroom. The house felt unusually quiet as the evening shadows began to fill the rooms. I opened the dresser drawer. The envelope was still there, exactly where I had placed it months earlier. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. Inside were several thick documents. Robert had written my name neatly on the front. I sat on the edge of the bed and carefully opened it. What I found inside made my heart stop. There were property deeds, legal documents, bank certificates, and a letter written in Robert's handwriting. My eyes filled with tears as I began to read. My dear Antonia, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer by your side. Forgive me for keeping certain things from you while I was alive. I only wanted to spare you unnecessary worries. Over the years, I invested our savings in several properties and businesses. The beach house is not our only asset. We also own 6 other properties, including the apartment building where Angela and Edward currently live. In addition, we hold shares in 3 companies that are worth far more than you might imagine. In simple terms, my love, you are very wealthy. You always were, but now everything is officially in your name. My hands shook as I continued reading through the documents. Robert had secretly invested money for years. There were houses in different parts of the city, a downtown condominium, a small motel near the coast, and the 20-story apartment building where my daughter lived. For the past 10 years, Robert had owned it through a private company, and according to the documents, I was now the sole owner of that company. The bank accounts listed numbers that almost didn't seem real. Robert had worked as a bus driver for 40 years, but apparently he had also been an incredibly intelligent investor. Every dollar we saved, every sacrifice we made, he had multiplied quietly, without ever telling me. In the letter, he explained why he kept everything secret. I never told Angela about our real financial situation because I wanted her to love us for who we are, not for what we have. The irony made my chest tighten. Our daughter had abandoned me believing I had nothing, when in reality I had everything. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I walked through the house slowly, touching the old furniture Angela always criticized for being outdated. On the wall hung a photo of Angela when she was 5 years old, sitting happily on Robert's lap. I stared at that picture for a long time. Where had that sweet little girl gone? When had she turned into someone capable of such cruelty? The next morning, the phone rang again. It was Angela. This time, her voice sounded softer. Mom, I just wanted to tell you we transferred the money from the house and the truck. Your share is already in your account. My share? I asked calmly. Yes, we gave you 30%. We thought that was fair. 30% of my own property. How generous. We're leaving this afternoon, she continued excitedly. Edward has an amazing business opportunity in Europe. We might stay 6 months, maybe longer. I see, I replied quietly. But don't worry, Mom, she added. When we come back, we'll help you find a smaller place to live, something that fits your needs. Fits my needs, as if she understood my needs at all. Have a safe trip, Angela, I said. Oh, Mom, you're always so understanding. We love you. Then the call ended again. I stood there holding the phone, and suddenly I laughed, for the first time since Robert died, because the situation had become almost absurd. My daughter believed she had left me with nothing, but in reality, I had everything. Sat quietly at the kitchen table for a long time after that call. Outside the window, the afternoon sun slowly faded behind the trees. The neighborhood looked peaceful, almost ordinary, as if nothing important had happened. But inside me, something had changed forever. Angela believed she had won. She thought she had taken everything from me. She thought I was weak, confused, and alone. But Robert had left me something much more powerful than money. He had left me the truth. And now I knew exactly what I needed to do. Later that afternoon, I opened my laptop and checked my bank account. Just as Angela had said, there was a deposit from the sale of the beach house and the truck. To most people, it would have looked like a decent amount of money, but I knew the truth. They had sold the beach house far below its real value. They needed quick cash. Edward probably convinced Angela that it was a smart move. I could almost hear his voice in my head. He always spoke with confidence, even when he had no idea what he was doing. That evening, I made a simple dinner and sat quietly in the living room with Robert's documents spread across the table. The more I studied them, the more I realized how carefully he had planned everything. Every property, every investment, every legal protection. Robert had been preparing for years, and somehow, deep down, I felt he had also been preparing for this exact moment. The next morning, I called the lawyer whose number Robert had written in the letter, Mr. Peterson. He answered on the third ring. Law offices of Peterson and Grant? Good morning, I said calmly. My name is Antonia Brooks. My husband, Robert, worked with you. There was a brief pause. Mrs. Brooks, he said warmly. I remember Robert very well. I'm very sorry for your loss. Thank you, I replied. I believe my husband left some documents for me that I need help understanding. I'd be happy to review them with you. When would you like to come in? As soon as possible. The next day, I took the bus downtown. Mr. Peterson's office was located in a tall stone building with large glass windows and polished marble floors. He greeted me kindly, but when I placed the documents in front of him, his expression slowly changed. He adjusted his glasses and began reading carefully. Minutes passed in complete silence. Finally, he looked up at me with surprise. Mrs. Brooks, your husband was an extraordinary man. I'm starting to realize that, I said softly. He tapped one of the documents on the desk. According to these records, you are the sole owner of several properties through a private holding company. I saw that. And that includes the 20-story apartment building on West Harbor Street? Yes. That's where Angela and her husband live, correct? Yes. Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair. Well, that makes things very interesting. I folded my hands calmly. What options do I have? He explained everything slowly. The sale of the beach house could be legally challenged because Angela never had the right to sell it. The truck would be more complicated because of the power of attorney I unknowingly signed. But the apartment building? That building had always legally belonged to Robert's company, which now belonged to me. Edward had used the apartment as collateral for several loans, but he had never actually owned it. When the banks discovered that, things would become very messy for him. Do you want to take legal action against your daughter? Mr. Peterson asked carefully. I thought about that question for a long moment. Angela was still my daughter, but what she had done could not simply be ignored. Finally, I spoke. No. He looked surprised. I don't want a public lawsuit, at least not yet. What would you like to do instead? I looked at Robert's letter resting on the desk. I want everything returned to its proper place. Mr. Peterson nodded slowly. That can certainly be arranged. Over the next few weeks, things began to move quietly behind the scenes. The sale of the beach house was investigated and eventually declared invalid. The buyers received their money back. The house returned to my ownership. Mr. Peterson also managed to track down the man who bought Robert's truck. Fortunately, he was understanding when he heard the full story. For a small compensation, he agreed to return it. The day the truck came back, I stood in the driveway and ran my hand across the hood. For a moment, I could almost hear Robert laughing beside me. Meanwhile, Angela and Edward remained in Europe. Not a single phone call, not a single message. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, my neighbor Aurora rushed across the street toward my house. She looked unusually excited. Antonia, have you heard the news? What news? Edward is in serious trouble with the bank. I raised my eyebrows calmly. Oh? Yes, apparently he used their apartment as collateral for several loans, but the bank discovered he doesn't actually own it. How unfortunate, I said quietly. Aurora lowered her voice. They're saying Angela might have to come back from Europe immediately to deal with the situation. I nodded slowly. Inside, I already knew what would happen next. A few days later, Mr. Peterson called. Mrs. Brooks, everything is finalized. What do you mean? You now have full legal control over all properties owned by Robert's company. Good. And there is one more thing, he added. What is it? The bank has officially contacted Angela and Edward regarding the apartment situation. I walked slowly to the window and looked outside. The neighborhood was peaceful. Birds moved between the trees. Life continued normally. Mr. Peterson, I said calmly, I would like you to prepare one more document. What kind of document? An eviction notice. There was a long silence on the phone. For Angela and Edward? He asked carefully. Yes. Are you certain? I took a slow breath. She decided I was no longer important in my life. And now? Now she is going to learn how important I really am. Mr. Peterson sighed softly. Very well, Mrs. Brooks. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not anger, not sadness, justice. And somewhere, I imagined Robert smiling. 3 days later, my phone rang again. I already knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. Angela. For a moment, I let it ring. Then I answered. Mom? Her voice sounded different this time. Not confident, not cheerful. There was tension in it. Yes, Angela? Mom, something really strange is happening. The bank contacted us. They're saying the apartment we live in isn't actually ours. I stayed silent. They said the building belongs to some company we've never heard of. She continued quickly. Do you know anything about this? I looked at Robert's letter on the kitchen table. Yes, I said calmly. I know about it. There was a long pause. What do you mean you know about it? That building has belonged to your father for 10 years. Another silence. Mom, what are you talking about? Your father owned the building through a company, and now that he's gone, I own it. For a moment, Angela said nothing at all. Then I heard Edward's voice in the background. What is she saying? Angela whispered something to him before speaking again. Mom, this isn't funny. I'm not joking, Angela. But we bought that apartment. No, I said quietly. You rented it. Her breathing became heavier. Mom, Edward used the apartment as collateral for several loans. If we don't resolve this, we could lose everything. I didn't respond. Mom, can you talk to whoever owns that company? Maybe they can help us. I took a slow breath. Angela, I am the one who owns the company. The silence on the phone felt heavy. Finally, she spoke again, her voice shaking. Mom, please tell me you're not serious. I'm completely serious. What are you trying to do? I'm simply correcting things that should never have happened. Edward suddenly grabbed the phone. Listen, he said angrily. Whatever game you're playing, you better stop it. Angela told me you signed papers giving her authority to handle your assets. Yes, I replied calmly. Papers I signed while I was grieving my husband. Well, that's not my problem, he snapped. No, I said, but what happens next will be yours. He scoffed. You think you can scare us? No, I said quietly. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm simply informing you. Then I ended the call. The next morning, Mr. Peterson confirmed that the eviction notice had been officially prepared. Do you want it delivered immediately? Yes, I replied. And where should it be sent? To their apartment. 2 days later, Angela called again. This time, she sounded furious. Mom, we just received a legal notice. I expected you would. It says we have 30 days to vacate the apartment. Yes, You can't do this to us. I closed my eyes for a moment. Angela, do you remember the day you called me from the doctor's office? She hesitated. Yes. You told me you sold my house. You sold my car, and you said goodbye in less than a minute. That's different. Is it? You were going to get 30%. 30% of my own life. Her voice cracked slightly. Mom, we needed that money, and I needed a daughter who respected me. Silence filled the line again. Finally, she spoke quietly. Edward said the investment in Europe didn't work out. I'm not surprised. We lost almost everything. I looked out the window at the street Robert and I had lived on for 40 years. Angela, I said softly, do you remember the beach house? The one we spent summers in? Yes. We sold it. No, I corrected her. I got it back. She gasped slightly. You did what? The sale was illegal. More silence. And the truck? She asked quietly. I have that back too. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Angela said something I hadn't heard in months. Mum, I'm scared. I felt a heavy weight in my chest. For a second, I remembered the little girl she once was, but I also remembered the woman she had become. Angela, I said calmly, actions have consequences. So you're really going to throw us out? You threw me out first. Her voice became desperate. Mom, please, we'll come back and fix everything. I thought about Robert, about the envelope, about the years of quiet sacrifice. You can come back, I said, but the apartment will not be yours anymore. What do you mean? You'll need to find somewhere else to live. That's impossible. No, I replied softly. It's simply reality. Angela started crying. For the first time since Robert died, I didn't feel anger. I only felt something else. Closure. Mom, do you hate me now? She whispered. I looked at the photograph of her and Robert hanging on the wall. No, I said. I don't hate you. Then why are you doing this? Because sometimes the only way people learn the value of love is when they lose it. I hung up the phone slowly. Then I walked outside and sat on the porch. The afternoon sun warmed the wooden steps. For the first time in many months, I felt peaceful. And somewhere deep inside me, I could almost hear Robert's voice again. Good morning, my love.
2 weeks later, the apartment building buzzed with unusual activity. Notices were posted on doors, letters were delivered, and tenants whispered among themselves. Angela and Edward finally returned from Europe. They stepped off the cab, looking exhausted and uneasy. Their confident, carefree demeanor was gone. I was sitting in the living room of my house, quietly reading a book, when I heard the faint sound of a car stopping outside. Aurora peeked in and whispered, "They're back." I nodded calmly. Angela stepped inside first, her face pale and tense. Edward followed, trying to look composed but failing. "Mom," Angela started, her voice shaking slightly, "we need to talk." I closed my book slowly, placing it on the table. "Of course," I said softly. "Let's talk." She glanced at Edward, who muttered, "I think we made a mistake." Angela took a deep breath. "Mom, we didn't know the full story. We thought you were helpless. We thought you had nothing." I looked at her. My heart was heavy, but my voice was calm. "Angela," I said, "you treated me like I was invisible. You sold my house, my car, all without a second thought. Do you remember that day?" She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I see now. I was wrong. I didn't understand." Edward spoke quickly. "Mom, we can fix this. We'll pay everything back. Please forgive us." I stood slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the street where Robert and I had spent so many years. "Edward, this isn't about money anymore," I said softly. "This is about respect, love, and honesty, something you've both ignored for too long." Angela stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I took everything for granted. I never meant to hurt you." I turned to her, and for the first time I allowed myself to see the little girl I once knew. "I know," I whispered. "I know who you were and who you can still be, but actions have consequences, and right now you need to understand what it feels like to face them." She lowered her head. Edward looked stunned, and I could see the panic in his eyes as he realized the legal power I now held. "Mom, please," Angela said, her voice breaking. "We'll do anything to make this right." I walked over to the envelope where Robert had carefully written every detail of our assets. I held it in my hands for a moment, feeling his presence. "You see this?" I said quietly. "Everything Robert worked for, everything he saved, it's mine to protect, and I will protect it, not with anger, but with wisdom. You have lost your sense of entitlement, and now you have a chance to earn my trust back." Angela's tears flowed freely. "Mom, I promise I'll be better. I'll change." I nodded slowly. "I hope so, Angela. I truly hope so. But it will take more than words. It will take patience, honesty, and respect." Edward spoke again, softer this time. We understand. We'll do whatever it takes." I turned back to the window, watching the sun dip low over the horizon. The warm light spilled across the living room, illuminating the photos of our family, me, Robert, and a younger Angela laughing on the beach. For the first time in months, I felt complete peace. Angela whispered behind me, "Mom, thank you for giving us another chance." I smiled faintly. "Remember this moment. Remember that love is never just given. It must be honored and respected." The room was quiet, not the awkward silence of tension, but the calm of understanding, a moment of reflection and growth. That evening I made tea for all of us. We sat together at the table, not as strangers, not as adversaries, but as a family beginning to rebuild. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it was softened by forgiveness, and somewhere in the back of my mind I could feel Robert smiling, watching over us. I knew that life would never be the same. Angela and Edward would carry the weight of their actions, and I would carry the strength of mine. But for the first time since Robert passed, I felt truly empowered. I was Antonia Brooks, 71 years old, a widow, a mother, and a woman who had quietly reclaimed everything she was owed, not just possessions, but respect, dignity, and love. And as the sun set behind the trees, I realized this was my life, my choice, my peace. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it with courage and with an open heart.
Hey everyone! Thank you so much for watching this story till the end. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button and show some love. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on our next amazing story. And if you want, hit the notification bell to stay updated with every new upload. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.